Hello, good evening, and welcome to the show My Talent, My Strength. Yes, today I have the mighty Arul sitting here in the show with me, and we're going to learn a lot about getting into the depths of our being. This is something that I learned from Arul. Arul is the author of the book Into Great Depths of Your Being. You see that online. And Arul coaches people on how to be a radiant universal leader. So this is how I met Arul. I kind of was on the path of young ovation, kind of was discovering myself, um, thanks to the mentors, kind of who had helped me saying this is something that I would love to be in. At that point of time when I was not able to make a decision and say yes, this is it, I had done my research, I had done my work, but I needed that stamp, and that's when God sent Arul to my life, and he worked on my parts of being. And he said, since I have a very high creative mind, uh, the coaching went on, and then I got complete clarity that young ovation is something I would love to do, and this is where I bring my parts of being to its fullest form. So thank you, Arul, for that guidance. And I'm so glad you were able to make up to this show. Just for others to know, Arul has about 24 years of experience in the coaching and mentoring business, and he runs People One Consultants. Other than that, he is the author of the book, what you see on the screen, Into Great Depths of Your Being. And he is an amazing coach, especially if you're looking at working on the depth of your being. I recently had the opportunity to attend his workshop on Sunday, and it was truly amazing. Over to you, Arul. Please let us know about your work, about your sadhana that you've been doing for the last 20 plus years. Take us through the different parts of being.
Thank you. And hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to connect with Leela. She just, exudes so much of energy and, vibe into the whole space. So thank you. I'll very briefly summarize the work that I'm doing, and then we could have a dialogue. So maybe I'll start with this. So in whatever we are doing, let's say for example, I'm just building a table, I'm doing some carpentry, I'm cooking, I'm doing my work. In whatever I'm doing, there's something in me that goes into the work or the action, and that's what we call presence or being. Which kind of almost intermingles into the action. So over the last 24 years, right out of college, I somehow bumped into this career of, field of training, etc. In the beginning, I was doing more of skill-based work. Slowly, I found that was not enough. I went inside, and then I found that I had to go deeper and deeper, and that's how my journey has been. Last 9, 10 years, what I'm doing is what I'm going to share with you today. Okay. So to look at it with another lens, whatever I'm doing, what's coming from inside me is my light, my clarity, my emotion, my energy, my joy, my sense of well-being that comes from my health, and something deeper, if at all we are connected to what we call our co-purpose, co-values, etc. So my journey has been that we all talk about self-awareness, we all talk about leading a meaningful life. So I was looking for something, and about 9, 10, or 11 years back, I bumped into the work of Sri Aurobindo, called the Integral Yoga, and I found that especially in a work where he's guiding his people who are following his path, how do you work on the difficulties that exist across the different parts of being? So that was the exploration, that over a period of time, I'm doing it in a simple way with many people. So what we call the 8 different parts of being is, first is the physical. By physical, we mean the body and the habits. Anything that is repeated gets into a habit. Anything that's formed into a habit takes a hell of a lot of time to, do a correction. So the first is physical, the form, which is composed of a lot of habits, both conscious and unconscious. The second is what we call the vital life energy, which is divided into three. So the first is first among that is the domain of senses, which is fundamentally looking at pleasure and avoiding pain. But from our day-to-day life, we also look at senses as a domain of our comfort zone. We want to take care of ourselves. We want things that are, comfortable to us. It's also the domain of playfulness, joyfulness, enjoying life, etc., etc. The second in the vital life energy, or the third part of being, the second being senses, the third part of being is the dynamic energy, the power, of which I think Leela would soon talk about it. Herself being an epitome of having the dynamic energy in its best form. So dynamic energy is personal power, is the capacity to face a challenge, to overcome it, its force, personal force. The fourth part of being is the emotion. That's where we start connecting to another, connecting to the environment, connecting to something apart from us, and taking it upon us to really take care of it. So care, contribution, giving, all come from these. Okay, so to do a quick recap of the first four: physical, body and habits; senses and comforts being second; the dynamic energy, power, force being the third; the emotion, caring, giving, compassion, etc. becomes fourth. Then we look at the mind. Okay, and in the mind, the fifth part being the mind is the data mind, the objective mind, the word, which looks at details, the analysis, goes into the facts information, and also the domain of communication. The sixth part of being, which is the second part of the mind, is what we call the idea force, the creative mind. So the data mind is about boundary. The creative mind is going outside the boundary, thinking outside the box, creativity, looking at how you can manifest something new, visualizing that in the mind. The seventh part of being is, like, I use a simple word first. It's a helicopter view. You go up, see all the details. You have many, many different goals. What's your core purpose? You like many different things. What's your core value? You're reading something. What's the core idea? So it's what is called the pure mind, the integrative mind. Okay. The sixth and the seventh part of being, which is the creative mind and the pure mind, starts going beyond personal agendas, a bit more impersonal, because it's really interested in purpose, values, ideology, the core idea, etc., etc. The eighth part of being is the deeper self, which is our own inmost core, which is also looked at the spiritual center. In a very simple day-to-day life, it's the part which connects us to intuition, and the path that gives us inner guidance through a method of spontaneous resonance, which means you just know that this person is something to do with you. This book, this path is aligned to you. So that's the deeper self. So that's a quick, base summary of the eight parts of being.
Superb, Arul. So we spoke about the physical, then we spoke about the life energy part of it, and the mind part of it, and the higher self part of it. Is that right?
Perfect. Yes. Perfect. Yes.
Superb. So, Arul, the next question to you would be how, since the show is all about talents, how do you identify what your natural strength is, what your natural talents are, and how can we kind of leverage on it, bring them alive in our workspaces, bring them alive in our lives, and how can we kind of move them beyond what is normal to something truly extraordinary?
Okay, very, very good. So let me just take the word skill, and then I'll bifurcate it so that we can understand a little bit deeper. So in organizations, they call it competencies. We know from a normal life, we call it talents, we call it strengths, we call it skills. So this is something that I do very well, and thus, I'm useful, I'm contributing, etc., etc. Now, so for example, let's just take playing a violin. Okay. So playing a violin has the different notes and the different techniques, but there's also a being component to it. You feel the raga, you feel the music, you feel it right inside you, and then you connect into the technique and it comes alive. So like that, every action or every skill has a doing part, which is the skill, the behavioral, the competency part, and it also has a doing part. So that's where using this eight parts of being, the last 8, 9 years, both using a tool and a direct method of observation, we are able to find that we are able to spot the natural talents and strengths of people. And I'll explain that in a simple way. Okay. So if we look at these two things, which is the life energy and the mind, let us say senses, dynamic energy, and emotional care, most probably somebody will have a affinity towards one more than the others. Of course, we all need the three. So, for example, for me, right from the beginning, census was something that I really come alive. It's where I had my biggest difficulties when I was young, as a teenager growing up and all that. And later on, through its purification and perfection, it has landed up as one of my greatest strengths. If you take my wife, for example, she's fundamentally operating, or her affinity is the emotion. Okay. Now, if you look at the skills, for example, one of the feedbacks that my wife has got in her earlier organization is she's the glue of the team. So when there's is the person who brings people together. When there's a conflict, she's the person who can understand where different people are coming up, and she can bring them together. So for me, senses gives me a great capacity of humor, joy. Like I can do some of the most difficult things, or like I'll be facilitating some discussion. Sometimes the most toughest situations could be spoken about, but I'll be able to carry with a certain lightness and a certain, a humor part of it. That's the senses. Same with the mind. Data, creativity, and the helicopter view. Most probably somebody will have one zone which is their favorite. Okay, and that will give them the corresponding talents and strengths. So, for example, if somebody has an affinity for knowledge of what is known, the curiosity, now he or she will have good talents that are building up in that domain, like analytics, knowing something, etc., etc. Somebody who's very creative on the inside, so you will actually discover it both from the problem and the solution. So for example, somebody who's emotional will always have a frustration when, say, in a group of 20 people, somebody is left out. They will actually feel that pain inside them. So you will discover your strongest both from the challenge and the limitation. So for example, if somebody's creativity is their innate talent inside, then they will shine in that field. They can be a great leader, they can be a great visionary. The greatest of challenge, they'll be able to see some pathway into it, and they'll create that. The pure mind, if it's their core talent, which is for me, and it just happened like that right out of college, they can always very easily discuss the other person's purpose, the other person's value. They will know what is the center. So what I'm seeing is, instead of just looking at from the skill, which means you'll have to keep on looking at different things, if I just go one layer deeper, I can understand, or we can understand people's configuration, and thus understand what talents and strengths would sit well with them.
I really love what you made us do in the exercise this Sunday, Arul, where
Yeah.
you actually kind of have worked on this beautiful matrix where you kind of identify what your life energy is all about and what your, the mind part of it. So that's where I discovered I had very high dynamic energy, and my creative mind was really at a high, right? And so the matrix kind of gave such useful insight as to how using this and this we can kind of come around and solve a problem,
Yeah.
right? Or kind of work on an area that we want to develop on. I wouldn't call it a problem, a developmental area. So that matrix and that alignment is something I really found very useful, Arul. So can you talk a little more about working around using your talents to bring in solutions in
Yeah.
the area where you're struggling?
Yeah. Okay. Uh, okay, it's almost like becoming explorer of oneself. It's almost like discovering the nuances of ourselves. So, if, for example, let's just take one of the most simpler things, the dynamic energy and the emotional care. Let's just take these two things, and I'll show it in an interface of, let's say, what a conversation that I was having, a coaching conversation I was having. So there are these two people working in an organization. Now, the boss is extremely high on the dynamic energy, which means highly driven. Let's move forward. Let's manifest. Low on the emotional care. Okay. Now he's actually a top leader. Okay, in that. Now you have another person, just one level below, just the opposite. Very high on emotional care and quite low on dynamic energy. So typically, and they both vibe very well together, in one sense of it. So it was a very interesting thing to do. So where they complement is, like, times when in that large group of about 12, 15 people, when people do not understand what is going on or left out and all that, this person, even though he's a junior, he plays that role of talking to them, making them feel comfortable. It comes very naturally to him. He finds a joy in it. Whereas the person who's senior is not able to do it, because I've also had a conversation with that person. The person struggles because their innate zone is dynamic energy. So it's like almost like, it's like you're playing cricket in your home ground. So the reason why he's very valuable in the organization is he is able to create a lot of results, manifest what the organization wants, and where the person one level below is able to complement, bring their talents and strengths is from the space of emotion. We care, we are together. Even if somebody is not able to understand what's going on, we kind of have some kind of a conversation where we handhold their journey. So that's how we can use our talents in a way.
That's complementary partnership to be really authentic,
Yeah.
right?
And at times there could be some difficulties also, but
Hmm.
that will overcome it through the strengths. Yes.
Got it. So you stay in your strong domain,
Yeah.
and you s- you work around what has to be worked around, staying at the core of who you are. So
Right.
I remember when you were telling me, it was about use your dynamic energy because it comes naturally best to you, and see how you can handle physical was a part that I am working on. So how you can handle the physical part, the habit part, through the dynamic energy part of it. So what came out for me is motivate myself on going around building the habits.
Correct.
So that was something that creatively manifested in me, and I am kind of seeing exactly, kind of trying to build in small practices, as how the book says, as tiny practices, so that you kind of get these things in place. So that's really amazing, Arul. That's really amazing. But Arul, one thing what we want to know is how do you identify your purpose? Because a lot of work what we do at Youngovation is truly to help individuals identify their purpose and see how it can manifest in their careers.
Okay. Very
Yeah.
good.
So,
Uh,
using this framework, how do you identify the purpose?
Okay, so this has been, my favorite topic from practically 1993. So for the last so many years, it's been a very important topic for me. There are two ways, in my view, and one is the way of the mind, and the other is the way of recognizing something deeper. And I'll share both out. So one of the things is to do is that. We just start looking one level deeper. So, for example, somebody is interested in A, B, C, D, E. There are 5 different goals that they are carrying. Somewhat, we got to look at what is the connecting thread that is cutting across all the five. Okay. There are two ways to do it. One is to look at what is the connecting thread, or if the person is very much on the surface, like today I was talking to somebody and he was quite blunt about saying that fundamental reason to live life is money. Okay,
Mhm.
and he was actually quite strong about it. Now, for somebody who comes like that, so a purpose is something a little one layer deeper than that. So one of the questions I somehow ask is, imagine that you have all the money that you want. Okay, so you got to do that first. Imagine that you have all the money that you want. Now, what is even more important? So that what is even more important often helps somebody to go from a very surface goal to something that brings the heart alive with clarity, with passion, with interest. And then when you have these couple of 4 or 5 goals, you kind of somewhat look at the connecting thread. Like, for example, this was the exercise that I did when I was just passing out of my college. I looked at many of my interests, who are the people I like, my father, mother, my mentors, and I wrote down all that I like in them, the different pursuits. And my reflection for about 2 to 3 days was, what's the undercurrent? What's the undercurrent? And I just came up with a path, like first, I mean, so I just looked at it like this, my mother, and I looked at from her, and yeah, she really has a lot of faith. So I converted into spirituality. I took the best of that. Okay. Then I looked at my father, very successful, came from the village and all that stuff. So that also attracted me, success, excellence. So I said, looks like for me, depth and spirituality and material excellence is the pair that I'm, interested to explore. So somehow, in even on the Sunday workshop, the person who had come from Trivandrum, she'd also, when we did this exercise in a group, had come up with a pair. So somewhere about two or three, like Vivekananda has said, rare is a man who's living for one idea. So if we are able to boil it down to two or three, see, purpose is not a goal. We can have many, many different goals. It's a direction towards which I'm going. And somewhere I feel when it has some integration component, like spirituality and material success sometimes is seen as opposite. But if my life pursuit is to bring it together, then I spend the whole of my life, finding out how to do that. So to summarize, so this is the minds method. Look at each goal, ask what is more important, look at really what is underlying, and see if you can come with a two or a three pair, is interesting. The other method, yeah, yeah. So the other method is a way of something deeper, with not too much using the mind. What am I resonating spontaneously to? Okay, and here we need to distinguish this with a desire. A desire is something we get excited about. That's great. Nothing wrong about it. But something deeper is like you get a very quiet satisfaction, even if nobody is appreciating you. You feel very happy. That's what they call the intrinsic motivation, intrinsic joy. So what when you activities, career options, or see, I personally feel that when you do the right things, money will come, success will come, everything will come along with that. So it's almost looking at what gives me that spontaneous resonance and pursuing that like a treasure hunt. I get into it, some clue comes, I follow it, another clue comes. Is another method that I've seen that purpose can be discovered.
Superb, superb. While you were sharing it, I was so much connecting to how young ovation actually came to, like, exactly as you said. You start with it, you go in the direction, one clue comes, then the other clue comes, then the other clue comes, and then for me the clues came, and where it kind of nailed it was when I had that my first coaching session with you. So that was the, after that there was no looking back. There was no looking back. I was very clear, this is what I wanted to work around, and this is what is going to give me a lot of satisfaction, and this is my way of contributing. So
Yeah.
that clarity kind of really kicked in so much more. Thank you so much, Arul, for that.
Yeah.
Great. Arul, so my next question to you would be for the youth. Okay, since you work, since you do such amazing workshop for students, viewers, Arul conducts this workshop. What is it called, Arul, for school students that you do?
Beyond schooling. Beyond schooling.
Beyond schooling workshop for the youth, for especially from fifth standard onwards. Is that right, Arul?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's right.
and you kind of help them identify their core state of being as well as their purpose. You help them kind of work around that part of it, right? The seed part of it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So since you work so much with the youth, and what I really love about Arul's work is he uses the same framework. He uses it beautifully with organizations, he uses it beautifully with individuals, he uses the same beautiful framework with students. How are you able to be so versatile with the framework, Arul?
Uh, See, because for me, these eight parts of being are not a label. This is something that I'm training myself to detect directly. So, for example, when somebody has a strong dynamic energy, that force actually touches you. Okay. When somebody has an emotional on a high, you feel a warmth in your heart. Okay. So my experiment in my lifetime is to really be able to spot and work on these very directly. With the students from the fifth standard has been, I was actually quite scared to get into that space because I was really not sure if I could do that well. But in the last 2 years, that's been my, I would say, my most important journey. So we just come together for 3 hours like once a month, and most of the time it's very scattered. Like we just pick one part of being, I'll start doing it, somebody will say something, somebody will say something, somebody in between may send one rocket also. So all this goes along, but I'm watching, I'm really watching. Okay. And like for example, there was this kid who had come for the very first time. She was in the fifth standard. We were actually exploring idea force, the creative mind. So we were actually almost in that space, and the class was getting a little bit chaotic, where people were saying different things. But somehow I managed my attention, and she brought something very interesting. She said, "If you're doing something from 1 to 10, and you follow the sequence, it's logical." I said, "Correct." This is a fifth standard student. Then she said, instead of going 1 to 10, you jump to 10 directly and wait there, wait there, wait there. Then you will get a clue. And then when you follow it, it's a combination of intuition and creative mind. It's perfect.
Wow.
In my, in my 9 years, I've never been able to articulate the way she had articulated. Another student, eighth standard, he came for my, he was actually being homeschooled, and he came for my class, I think for about a year and a half. And then through his mom, he insisted that I coach him 1 to 1, okay, which happened about 3 or 4 times. Now this guy has gone to abroad. He's exactly following his passion. He's learning carpentry, he's learning karate, he's learning violin. He wants to be a businessman, so he's got into a course to understand how startups function. Eighth standard. So I think we got to learn more from the kids. It's not the other way around. What I'm discovering is I'm spotting their parts of being. Like for example, another kid, I spotted his strength from his limitation. Like he was in the seventh standard. We finished the class from the fifth floor. We sent everybody out. I came 5 minutes late. Everybody had gone. This guy was rooted on the third floor with fear. You could obviously see it. So I walked up to him and said, "What's happening?" He says, "I am falling down. That fear of heights." So I spoke to him a little bit. I was already in good rapport with him. I said, normally what we tell everybody, look at one step, go down. He did that. Two classes later, he said, he has nightmares in the night. He sees all kinds of stuff. So while that is a problem he was sharing, I quickly recognized that the creative mind's domain is the visualization. I realized that the domain of imagination is very high for him on a minus. Now I know from experience that, like from my experience, I was -8, -9 in senses, and then I came +8, +9 on senses. So I know that part was dominant, but in a limiting fashion. So I really focused on him. In 1.5 years, this guy is very clear on his career, either robotics designing or architecture. And now he's in the eighth standard. He's learning both in his own way. Through his father, he's got into an automobile. He went once, he saw how they're doing it. He's doing the design. So if we just spot it for them a little bit and feed it back to them, they're really catching it quicker than adults. This parts of being is easier for kids, more difficult for adults.
So inspiring, Arul. What you spoke is so inspiring. And yes, we do similar work, but we use different set of tools. And my intention is to get them to the parts of being for which I need to kind of first master over it. And yes, it's a journey of self mastery plus working together. So that's something I truly am excited to work on. And since our workshop, I have tried to bring this on in my coaching assignments where I actually, kind of bring the breath practice, and I see that, wow, it works. It really works. Okay. And as you very rightly said, the intuition part of it, there is no timing to it. There is something that tells you, okay, now bring this on.
Yeah,
Okay. And you bring it on, and then it takes to the next level. So I'm seeing that bringing the different parts of being and bringing the practices into uh, my area as a coach has been really phenomenal.
yeah.
So taking it forward, Arul, so what has your experience been with working with the corporates and with individual leaders about the radiant universal leaders? Okay, folks, this is something that really drew Arul. Okay, I mean, we had not even met, and I was googling, I was searching, and I heard a few videos about him on radiant universal leaders. It sparked me. Okay, it was like, wow. And I heard the content of it. It truly moved me. I loved the video where you spoke about the swara, Arul.
Correct. Perfect.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's truly amazing. So can you talk a little about the individuals and also about the organizations, Arul, so that we get a perspective?
So I'm extremely selective when it comes to corporate work. So for example, in some organizations, I'm part of training their leaders, coaching them over about 8 months, 1 year, etc. But I'm extremely selective. I take organizations only when they believe in the inner work, which is from the inner to outer, being to outer. And I'm extremely passionate about culture right from the beginning. Like even when I formed my own organization, for me, culture was very important. So when these two get a tick, which means let's do being work and at the same time be very successful, build the competencies. And when they're interested in culture work is when I get into this engagement. There again, I use the same model. The model remains the same. Of course, I
Model
use
remains same. True.
model remains the same. But of course, I do a few more things. It's quite satisfying. Also, I think I'm evolving, over the years. With the like, one of the organizations recently called me to do a work on spiritual leadership. Now that leader was looking at somebody for 3 years, and somehow he hit upon, and we are exploring something. It's coming really well. With this organization, I actually taught them, it's a group of young supervisors, the first time supervisors, where I did a coaching for about 8 months. And then I actually taught them the metrics. So this is the metrics, I think it can't be seen.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but basically, it's
I
how
have the
the
same
yeah,
metrics.
with how the parts are interacting, I actually taught the supervisors to spot the talents of their team members and to train them. And at least I would say 60 to 70% of them are able to implement it. So it's like you just spot, you look for strengths, you find out whether which part of the mind is working, and if some part of the mind is working, give more work around that. Help them to come bring their talents out. So with some leaders, I find that they really want to do quite a bit, but they sometimes they're not able to get the roles in the regular content of the job. So then we really talk about enhancing their roles, either within the job or as a hobby or whatever, so that they bring their talents out in. So there again, I think it's quite interesting. One of the best methods I've used it, connecting the individual's purpose to the organization purpose, connecting the individual strengths to give what the organization wants, connecting the individual values to the core values of the organization. That exercise really works, and that's how I do it at the corporate.
Brilliant, Arul. Brilliant. Now to the radiant universal leader piece.
Yeah, so that yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. I'll talk about the culture part of it a little later.
Yeah, so this is something I wanted to work with a few people, and really at that point of time when I was conceptualizing, it just looked at 12 individuals that I could work, across my life. And I think right now I've got about 5, 6 of people who I'm working, long term. It includes one includes you as well.
Oh,
So
wow. Thank you.
so these are people where there is something in them which is extremely special. I would call that, like, for example, one of the gifts that I've been blessed is I can very easily spot the core purpose of people. And sometimes I say, sometimes I feel it's not, they're not ready, but I keep quiet. So, like that, where somebody has something unique, and where I think that they are really following a path of inner sadhana. Like, you have to do your inner sadhana to polish your radiance. By radiance, we mean connecting to your own deeper self, your own depth. And that radiates by itself without anything, over a period of time. So such individuals, I don't have too formalized. Some people I coach, I give a huge gap, and then we come back. We coach. Some people I'm doing it methodically. So I think across my lifetime, next, I intend to work with about, it could be 12 or more individuals, but they have something unique, and I just stand beside them with my capacity to sense what's going on. We share back, then whatever strengths they have, in the coaching conversation, we take it to its next levels. Give them some, glimpse of that they could, live and really manifest their destiny, is what I'm looking at through that Radiant Universal coaching.
Superb, Arul, superb. And I'm so grateful that at whenever there has been a time when I have needed some direction, okay? There is something, what I really like is you say it and it just stays somewhere, okay? Only when there is a need for it to manifest, it comes and it kind of really builds on. So it could be the creative mind that you spoke about in a few conversations when we were having the group sessions, right? You just said, Tika, don't fix it, let it be, okay? My creative mind, and I was trying to fix the habits part of it. So you were like, let it be. The moment I gave it freedom, I saw myself actually doing much more on that.
Correct. Yeah.
So that's something I really like about you, is you're very intuitive. You exactly know uh, how to spot that, and how to what to say and how to bring that without being very intruding types.
Correct. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the beauty of it. So Arul, two questions actually. One is on the culture bit of it, which I am also very curious. The next bit of it is, what is your message for the youth? Okay. So, first, I'm very curious. I know you're working on your next book and it's about the culture.
Yeah.
Okay. So, um, I kind of want to know it in a very broad perspective, because I know the culture is the true essence of any nation. It's the thread that runs inside all of us,
Yeah.
right? So how do you work around the culture fabric? How do you work around enhancing or enriching the culture fabric? Because there is another reason why I'm asking this. I truly believe that we as a country have a very rich culture,
Yeah.
and somehow it is it may not be in its best form right now. How
Yeah.
do we bring that to, how do we lift it up, and how do we own that with pride and live that beautifully?
Yeah, you're hitting on something important personally for me. Let me start looking. Let me answer it first from a country perspective. One of the books that really touched me is a tiny book called Renaissance in India. Okay, I mean, that's a
You
book.
gave this to me on the workshop, and
Yeah,
I tried reading it. Yeah, I am still reading it.
yeah. This book happened very interestingly. In fact, the 30% of the book I was reading inside a restroom, hiding away from a lot of people in the house at one point of time, and I just needed a 40-minute break, and that was the only space that was free. That was the first time I heard somebody, in this case Sri Aurobindo, talking about the soul of a country, and I didn't have such a sensitivity at that point when I was reading it. But what I heard in him, like for example, he describes the soul of India as spirituality as one component, opulent vitality. Like for example, you see the temples, you see the richness. I remember, when I was reading Tamil in my school, my teacher used to say that there are places in India where children used to play with gold. The richness was so much there. So opulent vitality in that book is described as another component of the soul of India, and the other is the intellectual. I forget the word, maybe superiority or capacity. Exploring different the dharmas and the sastras and putting it all together. And the fourth is a capacity that you explore anything to its end and bring it back. Like for example, poverty is explored to the highest extent and it's brought back. The tantric route, the enjoyment is explored to its extent and brought back. So when I read that is when I felt that, we all read that earth is a living being, but that's just theory. You don't experience it. So last 11 years I've been finding this as an important inquiry. And the way, of course, right from the beginning of my company, I really looked at my culture. So for me, when I walk into a company, when I interact with a family, for example, the culture comes out quite clearly if we are just not looking for something specific but observing everything. The one way to look at culture, it's what is really valued, what are the core values, what is essentially this company or this society or this entity is standing for. Of course, like as you rightly said, today we see in India that is really not in its best. There are things that are fallen down. But even in the fallen condition, the property, the essential property will be seen. That's when it's culture. Like for
Wow.
example, an organization had called me earlier, a couple of years back in the north, and we this couple of the senior guys were there. This is a large of maybe 5,000, 6,000. They kept on talking for 45, 60 minutes, and I hit up, and they were actually discussing the problems. But I hit upon that, yeah, you guys are really doing these two things. This is your core value. This is what you're trying to do that. And they were surprised because one of the methods I use to find culture, purpose, and values is to look for in both the positives and the negatives, in the success and failures, because only when both the success and failures has that stamp of that something deeper important, that's when it's a culture, that's when it's a purpose. So sometimes, in finding the purpose, I look at the greatest failures. There you will find the core aspiration. Core aspiration is purpose. So it doesn't matter success or failure. It's the greatest angst that the person has could turn around as the greatest aspiration. So similarly, culture is just a group of people what they really valuing. You can look at it as collective purpose, collective values, or even collective strengths. What they are really standing for. That frequency which is shared internally, even in its fallen state. So I don't know if I really answered your question. I went around quite a bit. So
It kind of fell completely in place. It
okay,
kind of
okay,
fell really in place. So it's about the collective intent, it's about the collective talent,
yeah,
it's about bringing that
yeah.
into life, is what we can call it.
Yeah, and on that is a very important point for me. Culture is non-hierarchical. This is a very important point. Like, for example, for me, 10, 12 years back, somebody had joined as a receptionist. In about a couple of weeks, I noticed that she was exactly resonating to the core of the organization, though she couldn't articulate it. Her communication was not good, but she was resonating. Then I slowly gave her some important roles. Later on, she landed up, playing the role of accounts and all that. She used to advise me on several things.
Wow.
She could tune into the organization. Times when we were about to make an error, she used to come and say, "Arul, but I do think that this is off track. This doesn't have the alignment." And you see, it's a different kind of a hierarchy. Those who feel the center, those who feel that could need not be at the top, could be at different levels in the organization. They are close to the culture, and if somebody can spot that, they'll be very valuable in being guardians, culture
Superb.
guardians.
Culture guardians. So that's your next book about, is it? Working on
Eh,
culture.
the next book is a combination of culture and a few things. It's germinating. Yeah.
Okay. I wish you all the best to germinate it very well.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Our last question to you, Arul. What's the message for the youth? At Young Ovation, we focus on the youth. It's a standing ovation for the young. It's
Yeah.
about each and every person being truly self expressed, loving what they do, doing what they love, and bringing their inner essence to the work. So it's like their work is an expression of who they are.
Yeah.
So this is
Yeah.
what we believe in Young Ovation. So we would love to hear from you. What is it that you would want to give us a message, as an advice, whatever you would like to say to the youth?
Okay, a concrete answer is not coming, but I'm. Let me just start and let me see if it comes. I think they are at a tremendous advantage and at a tremendous challenge at this point of time. The youth, the tremendous advantage is that the kind of opportunities, the kind of talents, the kind of creativity that is germinating and expressing is coming at a faster rate, much faster than people at an older age. So that's the good part of it. Also, certain very interesting values are coming naturally for them. For example, equality, diversity. We got to include people. All this is coming naturally. But at the same time, they're sitting on some of the greatest challenges because amongst the youth, for example, addiction is a biggest difficulty that everybody is facing, more than 70, 80, 90 percentage. So at one end you sit with the greatest potential, at the other end you sit with challenges that the youth is going through, etc., etc., etc. So I got the message, yeah. So I think one sign of evolution is what we call individuation. The person
Yeah.
discovers who one is at a purpose, value, quality, or strength, and is able to embody it and express it into the collective. Okay. Now, only when you have something to offer, you are valuable. They say go beyond the ego. first you have to have a ego, first you have to have a formation, then you offer it to the collective, then you're valuable. So I think, so for me, my individuation began only, say, for example, post my college. Today I see seventh standard kids starting to individuate, sixth standard kids starting to individuate. So that, I think, is the rarest opportunity, and it's not an advice, it's a message that if y'all can truly individuate, with a good degree of positivity, not looking down on people, but really individuating around who you are, what you can do, what you can contribute, your purpose, values, and strength. And if you can embody that fully, irrespective of challenges outside, then it's a diamond. It's a
Wow.
formation. Now that person, when they have, then they when they develop the attitudes of global citizenship, which means the world is our place, and when they start offering into it, I think we'll have a better place. So that's my sharing. Yeah.
Beautiful, Arul, beautiful. I can connect so beautifully to this. So individuate, find what your natural talents are, strengths are, find your purpose, and then expand it, offer
Yep.
it to the collective.
Yeah, that's actually radiant universal reader. Radiant is when you find, universal is when you are expanding and giving it out. Leading is inspiring people so that you make the world a better place. That's the meaning of radiant universal leader.
Brilliant. Wow. I felt so connected with what you said about, identifying, then radiating.
Yeah.
Identifying, developing, building it, making it strong, then radiating.
Yeah.
It's like really spreading your essence across. Profound, truly profound. Arul, thank you so much.
Thank
Uh,
you.
I mean, for me, it was again, every time I listen to you, I kind of get on, Guru Shishya mode. Okay. So I'm only listening because there's so much to observe, there is so much to learn. Thank you for being that energy source. Thank you for really guiding. And I could see so much of your integrative mind in action, okay? Because I was consciously looking at, okay? So I'm like, okay, now I know Arul is high on, sensory enjoyment and integrative mind. I wanted to see how it plays, how it kind of, falls across. So I could purely see your integrative mind in action in every single message of yours. So thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for being on the show. And for viewers, Arul conducts amazing workshops. He posts them on Facebook. I'm not trying to promote it, but they truly make a difference. Truly, madly, deeply, it has impacted my life and a lot of people whom I know. So just don't miss the bus when Arul posts it. Please do take it. It definitely makes an impact. Thank you so much, Arul.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Bye bye.
Have a great evening. Bye. Bye, viewers. Until then, until next week, please, if you really like this video, share it so that it reaches to as many people as possible, because what we discussed here is amazing nuggets of information which we normally do not find on open source. So please do feel free to share this video. Thank you so much.